So we've been working on this 1971 Cutlass for about 8 months now. And since I first got it, it has come a long way. So originally my buddy brought me this car. It was not running and he wanted me to get it running so he could drive it. And then it just tumbled and we decided to throw a supercharger on it. And it just kept going. And not only that, we did custom intercooler piping, custom intake piping. We did a complete wiring harness on this car. We got the car sandblasted, found a ton of issues with rust, got most of the issues on the body fixed right now. And that's actually what we're gonna keep doing in this episode. You can see we still have to do quarters. We still have to do a little bit of inner structure. We still have to do outer wheel wells. So in this episode, we are going to finish up all of the metal work on the rear of the Cutlass. Now there's a lot of pressure on me because this car has to be done next year. So I really have to put in the hours this episode, get all of the metal work finished up. That way we can get the car off the body cart and back onto the frame. So on that note, we're actually gonna start right where we left off in the last episode. We started to do a lot of the patches on the passenger side. Let me refresh you guys on what we were doing and then we're gonna keep going. So we've already done a ton of custom metalwork to the Cutlass, including this bead rolled firewall patch that we did. We also patched the passenger floor pan, and then there was a lot of patches that we had to do in the trunk and the rear of the car. Okay, so the inner passenger wheel well is pretty much all the way mocked up. You can see everything's tacked into place, held by my clamps. I'm gonna start by welding those holes, my spot welds first, and then I'm going to vinyl weld the rest of it, and then we'll grind everything. And that will finish up all of our inner pieces. I was really surprised how long these smaller patches took me. I was hoping to have this done in about a day, but this took me a couple of days worth of work just to get finished. So I actually had somebody comment on one of my videos asking why I didn't replace the entire trunk pan. First of all, so when I first got the car to my shop, we knew that the trunk pan was a little rotted, but we didn't know how much. From what we were looking at, all of the sides looked good. That's why we just ordered the main patch for the inside. Going back, if I would have known that all of this would rotted, I would have ordered an entire trunk pan and then just done the extra work to brace the car and cut the rest of the trunk floor out. But since we had already ordered the trunk floor, I decided to do the patches instead. Okay, so all the passenger inner stuff is all the way finished up. So now it's time to jump onto the driver's side and pretty much do the exact same thing. I was contemplating doing the outer wheel well and quarter right now, but I think since it's fresh on my mind, I'll get all of the inner stuff done right now. And then all that will be left to do is just the outer wheel well and get the quarter on. So I'm gonna get the blazer moved over and start cutting out all the rest on that side. But I'm pretty happy with how quick I'm getting through this. Remember, I only work on this a couple days a week just because that's all the time I have. It's pretty exhausting working a full-time job, plus doing the Cutlass, plus doing the blazer and editing. So that's about as much time as I can put on it. But I feel like I'm moving pretty quick. So I'm gonna jump on the other side and knock that thing out. And boy, was I in for a surprise. I originally thought that the driver's side was in better condition than the passenger side, but it turned out to be quite the opposite. So you see, I cut this piece out right here. It is like this. So I'm going to use the brake first, bend a straight piece, and then use the shrinker stretcher to be able to build that curve into it, just like we did on the other side. And the reason why I'm doing this piece first right here is I actually cut the inner wheel well out of the way and moved it. Now I don't want to cut it off yet because I want to make this patch in one piece, so I'm going to keep this to use as my template. But I'm working on getting this rear filler piece on first, and so I want to have this rust taken care of right here. That way I can get the filler piece on, which comes from about here and goes back, and then that will finish up the rear, and then we will slowly just work our way forward. That way we don't lose any structure and have any issues with really everything fitting. So I'm going to bend this piece right now and then shrink it and stretch it. That way we can get the shape right, get that welded in, and then we'll be moving on to getting that piece trimmed and set into place and welded. So let's get the rear of this finished up. So got a lot of work to do. Let's get started. So once I finished the floor patch, it was time to clean the rest of the sheet metal where my rear filler was going to overlay. After I got all the metal clean, I had to trim the trunk filler so that it would fit into place, and then drill all of the holes so I can spot weld it to the car. Okay, we are almost done with the rear. So you can see this patch right here. I got that in first because it actually sits behind that. So that's why I did that. I fully welded it back here and then coated everything with weld through primer. I'm gonna weld this when I final weld pretty much everything else. And then I also got this piece trimmed back here and then all of the holes drilled so I can weld them up and weld that panel to the trunk floor. So I'm gonna start plugging those holes right now, and then that will pretty much be it for the rear, and we'll move to cutting out the rest of the rust next. And just like that, the rear filler was finished. It feels so good getting one of these parts finalized. But the list goes on and on, so it's time to move to the next thing. Okay, rear piece is all the way welded in. It looks so good. I'm really happy with how it's coming out. It looks so good and it feels so good to finally be done with all of this weird inner rear stuff. So now the next thing is I'm gonna start to cut out all of the rust in here so that I can expose the pieces underneath, because remember what we did on the other side, the two pieces underneath were rotted, and I'm guessing it's gonna be the exact same thing on this side. So we're gonna cut this a little big so that we can expose the rust underneath. Now this completely blew me away. I had no idea that all of this rust was hiding behind the panel. Really, there were only a couple spots that were poking through, but I had no idea it was this bad. So this is one of the reasons I really like sandblasting cars, just because if we wouldn't have blasted this, I would have never known any of this rot existed. So it's one of the big reasons I like it. And it's also kind of crazy because you couldn't really see it from the outside, but now you can see how much rust is actually there, and we really need to repair all of that area. So I'm gonna cut out the rest of the rust and get it patched. Okay, well that outer piece is cut off, and of course the brace is completely rotted underneath. I mean, that is expected. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna cut along this inside line right here, cut the brace off. We're gonna build the new piece out of metal with our shrinker stretcher, and then we will do our outer piece. It's just kind of crazy to see how much of this outer piece there really is left. I mean, it was pretty rotted, and I'm really glad we saw this and we are replacing it. So we got to get the brace cut out and patched first, and then the floor patch will go in after that, and then finally the inner wheel well patch will go in, and that will finish up all of the inner structure on the rear of the car. So it was time to get to work. I started out by cutting out that trunk floor brace. I took a flat piece of metal, bent it so it would be a 90, and then used the shrinker stretcher to be able to build the curves into the side of it. That way it matched the original brace that was still on the car. Once I got the shape correct, it was time to weld it in, so I just tacked it all the way along that back side, making sure it stayed square with the inner wheel well. Once the brace was all the way finished up, it was time to start on the floor patch. So I pretty much did the exact same thing,
Used the brake and the shrinker stretcher to be able to build those curves to match the brace that I had just built, and then I had to drill a ton of holes for the spot welds, and then made sure to throw weld through primer on all the surfaces that were being covered, and then it was time to weld it all together. And I actually forgot to mention, sometimes it's easier to do these patches in a couple pieces. Since this floor patch was so long, I actually did it in 2 pieces. Okay, so the brace is done, and that is the floor patch that is over the top of that. I had to make this in 2 pieces just because it was a little difficult, but actually came out really nice. So now all that's left is I have to get my inner wheel well right here, and you can see I've got my old piece right there. I'm going to mark it, cut it out, and then get this inner wheel well welded in, and then that will hopefully finish up all of the inner structure. And I can't even tell you guys how excited I was at this point. All of the hard inner metal work is pretty much all the way finished up. Okay, so all of the inner metal work is all finished up. You see I got the inner wheel well patched. I had to do a couple little patches down here where there was some rot. Got this back piece all the way done. It looks really good. And then also went inside and got all of the metal ground in the inside of the trunk. So now the next step is actually doing the outer wheel wells and the quarters, and then that'll pretty much be it for the major metal work. Now we still have a lot of little metal work that we have to do and final metal work, but we're gonna do that once we get the body off the body cart and back on the frame. So I'm actually gonna start on the other side because it's a little bit easier just because I only have to do about this much of the quarter instead of the entire quarter. So I'm actually going to clean up the shop, get everything pushed outside, blown off, sweep everything up, push this back in the other way. That way I can get to the other side and we can do the patchwork on the passenger side first, and then we'll flip it around and do the same thing on the driver's side. So usually when I make a major step of progress in a build, I try and clean up all of my tools and the shop just so I can start fresh. This really helps me stay organized and not lose things, but it mainly helps me be more productive.
Okay, well, it's another day, and really today we're starting all the final fabrication on this passenger side. So let's get started. So let me show you guys how we're gonna tackle this. So you can see we have to do outer wheel wells, and then we also have to do quarters. So first things first is I'm actually going to get the quarter out and I'm going to get it clamped into place. That way I know exactly where it's supposed to be. And then after that, we're gonna get the outer wheel well pretty much set in there. That way the flanges pretty much lay flat on each other, and then we're gonna screw that into place. That way we can kind of mark where it's at and get to trimming. Then we'll pull the outer quarter back off and we will start to final weld the outer wheel well, and then it will be pretty much be time to just do the outer quarter. We'll get it all mocked back up again,
and then final weld it. So got a lot of work to do, but I'm super stoked to get this done. This is gonna be the biggest part. A lot of the other stuff you couldn't really see. I mean, all this metalwork in here, it was a lot of time, but it's just such small pieces. The quarters are such huge pieces and you notice them immediately. So this is gonna be really cool. So let's get started mocking up the quarter and getting the outer wheel well mocked up into place. Okay, so looking at the quarter, I kind of got it mocked up into place. This is exactly the reason why I cut out as little as possible, just because everything is always going to be off by a little bit since it's not factory. Look how much wider this is right here compared to this piece. So this is stock, this is aftermarket. That is such a huge difference. And now if we do this, that means the door will not line up because this is just so much longer. Also coming over here, you can see how off this is down here. It's about 1/4 of an inch off. Same thing all the way around. Back here, it's off. The back is absolutely atrocious. This whole shape in the rear is completely different on this new panel. Now, if this is all you have, if everything OEM is rotted, this is good, but this is exactly why I tried to replace as little as possible. What the plan is now is I'm going to pretty much run a cut all along this body line right here. That way I could get at least the body line lined up-ish, and then we'll start to mock up the outer wheel well after that. I'm just gonna cut the majority of this off because I feel like it's kind of getting in my way and it's not letting me move the quarter where I need it to be. So like I said, in order to get this where it needs to be, I have to trim it. And I decided to cut the front and the rear off just so I can move it front and back and get the wheel opening exactly where I need it. Now I'm going to be really open with you guys and tell you a couple of the mistakes that I made on this. I actually tried to clamp the outer wheel well and the quarter together first and then fit them up into place. But the problem was the outer wheel well was a completely different shape and I couldn't get it to fit. So I had to pretty much throw away that plan and get the quarter mocked up into place first and then do the outer wheel well. Okay, so I got the quarter pretty much screwed into place. So originally I was actually trying to get the outer wheel well and the quarter pretty much clamped together and then slide them both up into place just because I want to make sure that the quarter fit nice against the outer wheel well, but it did not fit at all. This outer wheel well is absolutely garbage. It does not fit at all. I'm gonna have to massage it so much to make it work. That's exactly why I cut out as little as possible because these aftermarket panels are trash. But there's really no other option, so that's what you have to buy. So I pretty much chucked that plan and decided that I was just gonna try and get the quarter fit up into place first. And so what I did is I just got it kind of fit in the back and then fit in the front as well, and then screwed it into place just like that. And if you look on the actual inside of the panel, I'm really tight all the way around this, which is exactly what you want, because now I know that it fits the original shape of the quarter. But now the really hard task is going to be getting this outer wheel well fit up in there. It has to fit flush against the back side of this so that you can lay down some spot welds to hold it into place. And then I have to make sure it fits flush up against the outer wheel well. So that is what I'm gonna work on right now. Since this is pretty much where I want it, I'm gonna try and get that thing fit up into place, and then I'll screw it up, make sure everything looks good, and then we'll pull this off and we will start to tack that into place. Mock this up again to make sure it's good, pull this off again, final weld the inner wheel well, and then get this baby laid on, trimmed, and welded. Let me just tell you guys, this is one of the most uncomfortable patches that I've ever had to do. It was just in the perfect spot to wherever I was grinding, it was shooting the sparks up around the wheel well and then right into my shirt or right into my face. And I was also in a really awkward position. It made me extremely exhausted, but it's all part of the game. Okay, so I pulled off the quarter just because I want to show you guys. I started to get all of the outer wheel well mocked up. I know it's kind of hard to see, but I got everything screwed into place. I got these pieces of metal and pretty much just used them as spacers. That way I could keep this exactly where I need it to be. And you can see how many I had to do on this side just because I didn't have enough metal there. So I'm gonna have to throw in some filler pieces. So now what I'm pretty much gonna do is I'm going to start to tack it into place. So just working my way around little by little, throwing a couple tacks just so it stays where it needs to stay. And then I will throw up the quarter one more time to make sure it fits up exactly where it was before. And then I will be able to final weld the outer wheel well, and then hopefully get the quarter on and get that thing final welded. And just take a minute and look how bent my neck is. I probably sat like this for like 3 hours, and sometimes with me, I get super hyper focused on something when I'm working and I don't really realize that my body's hurting until after I finish. My neck was cramping so bad when I finished getting this mocked into place, and I really have to work on remembering to get out and stretch every once in a while. So if you guys know the saying, measure twice, cut once, I tend to apply that a lot in automotive. I usually try and mock up things multiple times just to make sure everything is fitting correctly and nothing has moved on me. You'd be really surprised what happens to metal when it gets hot as you weld. Now I am just tacking this outer wheel well into place right now. I'm doing a tack about every 1 to 2 inches, and that is just to lock this into place before I final weld it, because we are going to be introducing a ton of heat into this and it cannot move. Also, you're gonna see when I start to final weld this, I went to the welding store and bought a welding apron because I burnt my legs so bad with the weld spatter just because of the position that I was in. So make sure to always take that into consideration with what you're welding and in what position you're gonna be welding in.
Holy crap, that was a lot of work. So let me show you guys what I had to do to make this outer wheel well fit on the Cutlass.
So squeezing in here and looking at the inside, you can see how many slits I had to do in this panel just to make it work. So coming down here, it fit pretty nice, but I had to slice all of this, add patches, add other pieces, and then put this piece back here. So now that all of that is done, I also had to do a slit right here just because this was the wrong shape. And I ended up cutting this into 3 separate pieces just because it was so off. Really,
this happens, this is part of the game. A lot of these panels, that's why I try and replace as little as possible, just because these things don't fit. And these are probably one of the worst panels that I've gotten so far. The Chevelle, I'm surprised really wasn't that bad. And we replaced everything pretty much fit up, but this was completely the incorrect shape. So I had to pretty much cut it and reshape it and get it to fit up. That's why you saw me mock up the quarter a couple of times. So really the outer wheel well doesn't matter. What matters is the shape of your quarter, and you have to make your outer wheel well fit the shape of your quarter, just so it looks good from the outside. So now that this is all mocked up into place and we know that the quarter fits, we're going to final weld the outer wheel well. So I got a lot of welding to do in here, but I'm gonna get started on that. And then after that, we're probably gonna mock up the quarter one more time, just to make sure everything looks good, and then we're gonna start trimming the quarter and prepping it to get it welded as well.
So we are almost done with this side, which is super cool. So I'm gonna get cranking and get this knocked out. Okay,
Okay, well, the outer wheel well is all the way on. I had to do so much work on this and I had to modify it so much to make it fit, but I'm so happy with how it's coming out. So really, I think that'll be it for this video. I really want to get the metalwork done in this video, but there was just a little bit too much work that I didn't account for, and the outer wheel wells did not fit at all. So there was a lot of fabrication that had to go into that to make that work. So I promise in the next one, we're gonna finish up the metalwork on the Cutlass, at least on the body, and hopefully get it back on the frame. So thanks so much for watching. Be sure to stay tuned for the next one. We're actually gonna get the quarter on because that's what I'm gonna start on right after this, and then we're gonna get the other side all the way finished up. Thanks so much. I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.